Whether you're moving overseas with your family, relocating employees on assignment, moving your organisation's workplace, or transporting and storing high-value art or information, logistics in the modern world is complex. Our new podcast brings you expert voices to share insight, discuss trends, and offer practical advice, all with a view to making it simpler for you to live, work, and do business anywhere in the world. March is International Women's Month, a month celebrating, recognising and championing women all over the world. So to mark this significant occasion and cap off a series of activities, we're bringing you a two-part CrownCast special. Hosted by Reema Prabhakar, a panel of women from across Crown's family of businesses discuss how they navigate the modern global workplace. To explain more and get the first episode underway, here's Reema. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to CrownCast.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of CrownCast in celebration of Women's Day. I am Reema, your host for this episode, and thank you for joining us today for a thought-provoking conversation on women in the global workplace. We will be exploring various topics related to how women navigate the modern world of work. We will look at issues such as relocation and assignments, cultural differences, career breaks, returning to work, and the changing physical workplace itself. So I'm joined today by three senior women from across Crown's global business footprint who have had a range of experiences to shed light on how they've overcome any challenges, seized opportunities, developed their careers, and much more, but also to share their own experience. So hi all, and thank you for being here today. I thought we would begin by briefly introducing ourselves. So a little bit about our career backgrounds and perhaps from where in the world you're joining us today. I'll go first. I'm Reema, and I work in the group communications team at Crown based in London. My role involves managing the group group brand, Crown Worldwide Group brand, both internally and externally. For Crown, my career background has been in communications and marketing, and I have lived and worked both in India and the UK. I have experience in sectors like banking, media and entertainment, local government, and now in logistics with Crown. So, Jo, I'll come to you. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you. Nice to meet you, and nice to meet everybody on the podcast today. So I've been in training pretty much my entire career, and I currently lead Crown's business unit that develops and delivers intercultural training, language training, and partner support programs. I've been doing it more years than I'm going to admit to anywhere public like this forum, but for 20 years I've been doing it for the global mobility business. And today I'm joining you from Chicago, having relocated myself.
Thank you, Jo. Sherry?
Thanks, Reema. Pleasure to be with all of these fantastic women today at Crown. My name is Sherry Leo. I am the Group Vice President for our Moving Services Division. And my first relocation was actually near where Jo is now. So my family's originally from Taiwan, but we moved to Wisconsin when I was a toddler. And I grew up in the U.S. Midwest. And since then, I've had the pleasure of moving 4 times with Crown, mostly across Asia. And it's been really a wonderful, also very long time in this industry. Moving is something that has always been part of my sense of adventure and wanting to experience the world. And it's really great to be able to talk about it a bit today.
Jackie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jackie Bird. I head up our workplace consultancy team for Crown Workspace in the UK. I'm currently at home today, but I'm normally based out of London. I've been helping people change how they work culturally and physically in this office space for probably too many years, 25 years plus. But it's an area I love and ever evolving.
Lovely. Thanks, Jackie. Let's dive into our first topic of the day and talk about what it's like to relocate as a woman. Most of us here have just mentioned the different places we've relocated to over the years. And moving to a new place is an exciting prospect, and at the same time, it's a life-changing decision. So there are several considerations around that. So I was just interested and curious to know what were some of your motivations for moving, and what has been your experience? And did you have any concerns about living and working abroad? So Jo, perhaps I could come to you first.
Yeah, so I had always wanted to have an international living and working experience. And I had originally tried to secure employment in one or two European countries, but that didn't work out. But I'd always had this fascination with the US, partly because it's so big, it's so vast, and the UK is so small. So it felt very unfamiliar, but at the same time familiar. I also had a very romanticized notion of it. My great aunt was a GI bride and married one of the GIs stationed near where she was growing up and moved to Los Angeles. So I think I had this really unhealthy romanticized notion of it. We always tell assignees in our programs, don't just look at the good, don't be in the the dream phase about it. But I was. I also made some subconscious decisions to not get married and not have children until I'd had that international experience. So I think it was something I was always striving to do, which I think raised my first experience as being a female person relocating and being single. Was I'm pretty certain that no men get interviewed at the consulate about why they're going to the US as a single woman, and was I planning to get married, which I thought was a highly invasive question, and I was not expecting it. But yeah, that was my experience when I was relocating a long time ago. And I'm interested to hear what Jackie and Sherry say. I think for me, the most jarring thing was the ever-present thoughts about my personal safety. I could leave the office at 5 o'clock on a Friday in the early days of being over here when I didn't have a personal network yet. And it was entirely possible that I would not speak to anybody that knew me again until Monday morning. So everywhere I went was new. Everywhere I could go, I could get lost. Everyone was a stranger. And I really just had to be extremely mindful of my personal security, because Chicago's like a lot of major cities. You can go from a really good neighborhood to a really bad neighborhood in kind of one street. And so that was something that I think was just quite stressful at the start, and that maybe is more something I felt because I was a female and I was relocating on my own.
That's so interesting, Jo, because I had the opposite experience, almost in the reverse. I had been coming from Washington, D.C., which in the late 90s was very similarly, one street away from Capitol Hill. It could be a fairly rough neighborhood. And then relocating to Asian cities, I actually felt my safety improve as a single female, because for the most part, it's actually much safer for women, whether that was in Hanoi or Taipei or Shanghai. My sense of street smarts actually went down because I didn't have to be as aware. They felt also that there was less for me to have to worry about in terms of personal safety. So I felt that was a significant life improvement moving abroad.
That's really interesting because we always talk to female assignees in our training programs about being vigilant, but maybe we need to refresh some of our content.
So Jackie, you've moved cities, haven't you? I mean, you've not moved cross country.
Yes. No, I haven't had the opportunity to move internationally, but I have moved from London down to the West Country in Cornwall in the UK. And really, the pandemic kind of was the panacea for that for me, that I was currently bouncing between the two locations, operating my own workplace consultancy. This is pre me joining Crown. And the opportunity presented itself. There was no point in having two offices or two locations to work from. And of all the dreadful things the pandemic brought about, there was some good and positive things that it actually introduced. And being to work and live in a place that I love was absolutely a fantastic opportunity for me.
But the all-important question, did you learn to make sourdough bread like everybody else?
No, but they do run classes in our village, so I'm going to put my name down probably in the summer.
When there was sourdough or banana bread. I remember banana bread was very big during the COVID years as well.
I did do a lot of baking during the pandemic, though, so that was lovely.
Work from home and bake cakes. That's what we do.
I've actually, I mean, when I moved from India 15 years ago now, it feels really long time back, to the UK, I had a different experience. So I grew up in Mumbai, which is a major city. So, Jo, I had some of the concerns that you had in a new city, but I guess India had prepared me to be street smart and things like that. So when I came to London, it felt very safe. It felt like, I mean, it a little bit like Sherry. I think you had that experience in Asia, but I had that opposite experience of coming from Asia to Europe and feeling that, I didn't need to be as on guard, that you would feel in a different big city. So that was my experience. And I think some of the other concerns I had when I moved were things like I would be restarting my career in a new country because I moved with my spouse then. And so that was a concern I had. Also, access to affordable and good quality healthcare because I had that in my home country. So, I was interested to understand how it works in the UK. It's very different to the way it works back home. So that was another concern I had. And I suppose also finding a good support network in my new country of residence because I didn't have any extended family here. And also the other thing that I thought of, and I think, Jo, you can add a little bit of your perspective here, is how to fit in culturally because it was quite different initially. I think I was excited at the start, obviously, because I had grown up, obviously, reading, like the rest of us, English literature. So I wanted to come and, visit all those places that I had read off in my favorite books. That was a huge positive. And I think on the slightly negative side would be the food. I have to say, I'm sorry. But coming from India, and this is, the interpretation of Indian food in the UK 15 years back wasn't as good as it is today. Today it's moved on and it's absolutely, somewhere else. It's really good. But at that point in time, the first time I walked into an Indian restaurant and had a meal, I was shocked. So I think those are the sort of cultural things that I experienced initially. Jo, do you have anything to add? Being someone who trains, assignees as well from a cultural perspective and what to expect.
I mean, I could talk about this all day, but I promise not to because I'll bore everybody. But I think there's a couple of things you said that were really interesting. One was about your experience because you weren't the what we call the lead employee, the lead assignee in that decision. And there was actually a really interesting article in the Financial Times recently about how there is a disproportionate negative impact on the female's career when she travels with her male partner who's going for another job. But you seem to have managed to kind of navigate a career in the UK and be pretty successful. So there's that. And we talk a lot to couples about what it means and how you need to, I hate the phrase the trailing spouse. They used it in that article, but it kind of describes what that person's doing, but how you have to adapt really quickly culturally so that you can build your professional network and build your personal network. Because if you think about it, if you're the assignee, so Sherry, if you're you and Crown's moving you, your life, in some ways, the structure of your life doesn't change that much. Right? You're going from one job to another job. Okay, different office, but you probably know a bunch of people that you're going to be working with. But if you're the partner, you leave everything behind, your job, your friends, your family. And when you land in that host country, you have really nothing and you have to start from scratch. And so we do work with women about how to quickly navigate the culture so that you can build those professional networks. But yeah, so you did a really good job of that, Reema. You managed to get over here. And how long did it take you to feel comfortable till you woke up one day and said, I'm okay?
Well, I actually enjoyed, moving to the UK, and I had a brilliant experience. So I would highly recommend it to anyone. But I did have a career break, which we will get to a little bit later in the chat, which where I can talk about this a little bit more. But I think overall the experience has been great. And just curious, Shari, can you talk about any challenges that you felt? Having moved multiple times, it's not just once that you've moved. So you're a bit of a pro now for us. But from your perspective, what do you think are, a couple of challenges that women might face when they move?
I think my own moves definitely helped me to empathize with the experience of relocating, because as Jo says, makes such a significant impact across every area of your life, and you have to be very resilient. And I think in the early part of my career, traveling on my own without family, it was very easy. The decisions I were making were purely my own. So pack 2 suitcases. Where do you want me to go next? That was as much as it took to get me to move to a different country. But as I got older and my family life started to change and I had kids, I think it becomes far more complex. My considerations are no longer just about myself. I have to actually put others, my dependents, before for myself. And so I think that my experience is that it becomes a lot harder to just relocate. You have to consider everything that just got mentioned, your support structure. I don't want to be the only one that thrives and everyone else is just reluctantly pulled along. I really have to think those things through. And so I do think it becomes a lot more difficult for women to consider relocating the further along they move in their lives or their career.
Yeah, thank you. I do agree with all that you've said. And like you've said, that maybe these are some of the reasons why studies indicate as well that women form a much smaller percentage of international assignees. In fact, I had the chance to go through the 2023 Mercer report on the Worldwide Survey of International Assignment Policies and Practices. That is a word. That's a mouthful, isn't it, that title? which said that women make up only 20% of international assignees. And I believe that number has hovered around the 15-20% mark for a while. And although this number might vary by industries and countries, it does indicate that, like you said, Sherry, women find it harder to relocate for work possibly than men. And I was wondering if this question is to anyone in the panel who might like to answer. Why do you think, that reluctance is there? I mean, there are some factors like you've mentioned, life stages, etc. And how can we overcome these challenges? Because we do make the half of the workforce, don't we? So, and there is a great, talent set that's available for companies in their female employees. So do any of you have any thoughts to share on that?
I think it's a really interesting question, because on the side of the business that I work in, where it's company-sponsored relocations, most of the people we're working with are middle to senior managers. And so women are not as greatly represented in those roles as A, I think they should be, and B, it's not reflective of the demographics. So I think your candidate pool is already smaller when you're dealing in corporate world mobility. But I think Sherry answered it with her own personal experience. Women tend to be much more hesitant to disrupt their partner's career or disrupt their kids' schooling. They're also disproportionately more likely to be the primary caregiver for any elderly family members. And so that kind of creates a lot of additional concerns that might make a female assignee not take an international experience. And I've been doing this more years than, like I said, I care to remember, but we have not moved that needle on that number in 2 decades. We just can't seem to push through it, no matter how much we talk about it. But I have started seeing some companies really make strides in trying to prepare a better pipeline. So we've got one client who says, if you want to be at a director level within our organization, you have to have been on an international assignment. To do that, we are going to tap you as a high potential early in your career, and we're going to give you 5 years during which time you go on your international assignment. And that's very different than the usual experience of, hey, Jackie, I need you in Shanghai in 3 months, off you pop. It's so this planning, this career pipelining means that it gives women a lot more chance to take care of everything, and make sure that they've taken care of the family. But I think it's, so it's those two things. It's lack of representation in senior roles that typically go on assignment, and then it's a greater concern. That's certainly what I see in the kind of company sponsored global mobility world. Is that the same, Sherry, with people that kind of do their own self-initiated moves?
Yeah, I think, people who, primarily self-initiated moves are driven by employment opportunities or wanting to have employment opportunities just in other places. I love the fact that there are companies who are thinking ahead, because I think women by nature are planners.
Yes.
No, we like to, to sort of see how this decision will fit into, the broader, I guess, trajectory. And, modern life has a lot of pressures, and I think a lot of women often consider, well, that's like too much rocking the boat. It's hard enough to balance all of the plates, and my relationship with my partner, children, family. If I precipitate something as life-changing as an international relocation, the fact would certainly make it a lot easier to make that decision if it was well supported, and that companies who are thinking about their talent pipeline, they're thinking about women in senior positions. I think they're very smart to think about how to help women plan ahead. So it does make sense, so that everyone can see that broader vision within, the family, that there's a place for everyone to get a lot out of the experience, and, ultimately where, that might end up. Hopefully those things look a lot more positive than, on balance, maybe slightly negative or slightly too much to handle. Because I think that that's another load that a lot of women just might not want to bear at a time when you have a lot of pressure from maybe childcare or care for others.
Yeah. And I think that's a nice segue into, talking a little bit about, related to life stage. One of the things that women often, have in their career more regularly than men is a career break. Now, that could be because of maternity leave. It could be, like you said, for caring responsibilities for other members of the family, whether that's elderly relatives or someone who's, suffering from an illness, for instance. And maybe just to take a sabbatical sometimes, for following, doing something that you want to do that, your work may not have allowed you to do, such as write a book. So I was wondering, when it comes to that piece of career break, I think, Jackie, if I come to you at this point, because I know you've taken a sabbatical from work, yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what was that like for you, how long it was, and how was it for you to come back to work?
Okay, so for a very long time, one of my dreams had been to run and manage my own little shop in the village in Cornwall that I live in, and I guess I had it on the retirement spectrum to happen, I guess, towards the end of my career. The pandemic made that happen a lot quicker, and as I said earlier, we were running a small workplace consultancy ourselves, and a very successful one, but it was almost like a light switch. Somebody turned off the projects overnight when everybody was no longer in the office, because a lot of the work that I do is in the physical office environment, and so we kind of put the business on hold during that period. But I found myself at a loss to know what to do. And so when the world started to open again, I had the opportunity to open a little shop, and I ran a home and garden shop for the best part of 3 years, which I absolutely loved. The first couple of years were great because everybody came to the West Country because nobody was travelling abroad.
No one could go anywhere else.
The third year, probably not so good, because then people started going to travel internationally again. And so the footfall wasn't there in the village. And then really the reality that I've got bills to pay, and this is just about reaching that, and some days not. So I had to, I had that reality check where I actually, as much as I've done this and it's been fabulous, I really want to return to the corporate world. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. I advertised the fact I was available for work, and Crown were one of the first companies that approached me. So, which is great. And I've come back to corporate world. It has been an adjustment, I can't lie. Previously to joining Crown, I'd worked for small SME businesses, and very early on in my career, I worked for a big shipping firm, and I liken Crown to that environment. It's very corporate. They're great. They look after their client, their staff very, very well, but it can sometimes feel not as responsive as I was used to in my own business. So, there's good and plus in all things, but it has been great to get back into that. And because of the pandemic, the hybrid working is now prevalent. I don't think we'll ever see that change, in honesty. And that has given me the opportunity to deliver the role that I do. I think if we had gone back 5 years, then I wouldn't live where I am and apply for the job that I got at Crown. It wouldn't have happened because I didn't think I would have had that level of flexibility that I now enjoy. So, that's kind of what happened to me.
Fascinated by that story, Jackie. I think that's amazing that you got to go and live your what you saw as a post-retirement dream and actually do it when you were still young enough to really enjoy it. And then I think sometimes as women we don't follow our dreams. We kind of, they stay as dreams and we don't do adventurous things like that. So I love that story.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it was really good, but I'm glad I did it when I did, and I've had the opportunity to come back to an industry that I've known and loved for 20 odd years. So
Would you do it again in the future, Jackie? Is that something that you're marked for, or when I decide?
I think maybe when I retire, because I'm quite I'm a crafty person. I make jewelry and I paint and all of those sorts of things. So I think if I were to post-retirement, if I were to do it as a hobby as opposed to an income, something, if I didn't need to rely on it, then yes. But it would need to really just be beer money and nothing else.
Beer money.
That is the dream, isn't it? Every woman has this dream of having a bookshop and a cafe, is what I've read. And it's true for me. But that is the dream, isn't it, Jackie? So thank you for sharing that. Sherry, Jo, have you ever had thoughts of having a sabbatical, taking a sabbatical from work, and something you would consider?
You mean other than every Monday morning when the alarm goes off?
That is so true.
No, I actually really haven't, which is interesting because I live in the States where vacation days are precious, so you get very few of them. And so I would have thought if it was going to enter my thought, it would have done so now. But no, I'm sure Sherry thinks about it every Monday morning too.
It has crossed my mind. I think I took maybe a 2-month non-maternity leave sabbatical at one point, but between Shanghai and Hong Kong, that relocation actually took a little bit of time off, and I was sort of resetting my thinking around, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? International relocations? Are there other things, that I should consider? And so that was the time for me to take stock. And I decided that, I was really happy with the career path I was on, what I was pursuing, the opportunities at Crown. And since then, it's fit into my life. Careers are really important to me. And, I think it was challenging when the kids were little. There were lots of times during that time where I thought, I probably needed to think about if I can really possibly juggle it all. And I didn't, there are some things that fell apart. I'd be perfectly honest. So, I can't say that everything's been smooth sailing, but, I've been very much always driven by a feeling of self-actualization through work. So absolutely, would I like more time off? Yes, but very much enjoy my career.
but we'd like it to be paid. That's what we really want. More time off, but have it be paid.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I can pick from what you said, Sherry, about that maternity aspect of it. So for me, we spoke about a little career break earlier, Jo, and I took that break when I moved. For the first year, it was more about, sort of exploring Europe and and discovering the new, the country that I had moved to. So exploring UK, etc. But eventually, I took a break to, spend time and to have a family and to spend time with my daughter. And I think from my perspective, it was also, there were several considerations when after she was born and a year later when I was considering of coming back to work. I had to actually seriously think about things like childcare because, for instance, in the UK, childcare is very expensive. I also had to think about work timings and how I would balance that. So I think I felt almost that it was easier to take a break at that time and pay attention to that part of my life and then come back to work. And even when I returned, we didn't have flexible working available so readily at that time. This was pre-pandemic, sorry. And it meant that I had to sort of stagger my return back to work. And even in terms of coming back, like you briefly mentioned about sometimes it being a bit of a disadvantage if you are someone who's come into the country with your spouse who's working, for instance. I felt that, because for me to come back meant that I was almost starting from scratch. So I did feel like it set me back a few years in my career and I had to play catch up. And to break through in that initial phase to kind of find a job that kind of suited all my requirements, because it wasn't just, anything. We had to make sure it worked with the family, etc., all of those sorts of things. But I have to say that once you're back into, and you've had that breakthrough and you're back into the workforce, then it's a question of, just kind of juggling it like all women do and balancing family life. So I am curious to know, how do you all juggle, those two aspects? Because that's not unique to just when you have kids. This is something that, women manage on an everyday basis. It's more of a struggle than a juggle sometimes.
And with that, we come to the end of part 1 of this really interesting conversation on women in the global workplace. Thank you to my wonderful panelists, Jo, Sherry, and Jackie, for sharing your thoughts and insights with us today. We will continue our discussion on work-life balance in part 2 of this CrownCast Women's Day special, talking about how we can juggle better to overcome some of the challenges we spoke about in part 1. And also to chat about what does the future of work look like for women. I'd like to thank you for tuning in today. I hope this episode helps spark some interesting conversations, and I hope you share it with others. See you in part 2.